345. But you think about it, Big 12 now, Iowa State, Baylor, up in Ames. Baylor was tested and, of course, not able to get through it in what happened in Provo. Does that make and help them against that crowd in Ames? 11 o'clock Saturday? I don't know. But I still see a team that is they don't know who they are yet, or they don't know quite what to do yet. Dave Aranda discusses that. We'll have a little comment from him at 4:30. He even admitted that in the post-game press conference about the team was playing tight. There was almost this need to release some stress, but they did what they're supposed to do in the end. But the younger players and even others are trying to maybe just get through a few things. And one of the things he thought about might be the ghost of how good they were last year.
Can I just go ahead and assume that you're trying to poke at something maybe? Is that they're not a very great team right now?
Now, this weekend to me, no, I'm not saying they're not very good. It's
and if
too
you
early
are,
to
like, that's
I'm
fine.
Not. I would say that if I didn't think. But to me this weekend, because you lost in Provo, without being overly dramatic, to me this weekend, you win this weekend, you have a chance to be an 8-9 win team. To me, if you don't, then you're headed for one of those 7-5 teams that a lot of people, when Craig brought up it, they thought they were maybe 8-4 because of some of the questions. A lot of people are like, tell us who the 4 losses are going to be.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we might have 2 before we even get out of the month of September.
I did get that screamed at me a couple of times. Yeah. Like, 8-4. Like, who are they supposed to lose to? It's like, I don't know. Look at the road schedule. All those teams, basically. I mean, so one of them's already out of the way with BYU, and we saw what they turned around and did, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And now here's Iowa State right out of the gates. And you know what? That Texas game looks more difficult than when it was first announced. That Oklahoma game looks more difficult than when it was first announced. And, I think you can go across the board pretty much with that. Now, maybe not West Virginia, but by the time that rolls around, the fact that's a weekday game, that's going to be pretty tough to overcome. So, yeah, I mean, they've got a really tough slate in front of them, and I think you're right about this weekend. But I think, kind of like you're saying, and I know you said if you felt that way, you'd say it, but I'm feeling like, yeah, they're an 8-4 team probably at best right now the way that they're playing. Absolutely. They are not a 10-win team in their current state. There's a great defense, but there's a lot of questions on offense, and there's still some questions on defense to some extent, but there are many questions on offense. There are a few questions on special teams even. That was not exactly the cleanest phase of the game this past couple of weeks. So, yeah, they're a team that is sitting there with a giant fork in the road. And I mentioned a fork in the road last week after BYU. It's like, okay, what direction do you want to go? Do you want to pout and not overcome this and kind of just drag your feet a little bit? Or are you going to bounce back ferociously and be like, that's not us, we learned from this, and bam. And I think you saw both of those things against Texas State. The first half was the kind of dragged out and emotionally still overcome and the physical toll. And then the second half you saw a team that's like, oh, we're playing Texas State. We should beat them, and we should beat them convincingly. And then they went on to do that. But what team shows up in Ames, Iowa, I have no idea. And I do think it's one of those, you going 8-4, or are you going more towards the 10-win side of things?
There are 2 things that concern me about this team, and I will say them repeatedly. One is I don't know if they have guys. I mean, Travis called me presumptuous last week, but I watch guys, wide receivers, not win routes. Mm-hmm. They're not winning. They are not winning routes, so it's making it hard for Blake Shapen to complete those passes. They cannot take the top off of a defense right now. They have not had that problem in a long time. Even some of their bad teams could chuck one out there and have a guy run underneath it because
they had one deep ball that was just a little bit off. But yeah it would have been really helpful to hit that pass.
But right now they're not doing that. And the other thing is, this is not a great team on the road. They weren't great on the road last year. They lost to Oklahoma State and TCU on the road last year. Those are those 2 losses. They've played one road game this year. They've lost that game. They're going to a place that even at 11 o'clock in the morning is going to be, they'll stay up all night.
Yep.
They'll eat eggs and drink beer. Yep. That's what they're going to do.
Or drink beer, then eat eggs.
They'll put it in a smoothie. I don't know, but it's going to be wild.
And there's some things that are going on with them that the Khalil Keith, who has not played, the offensive lineman, appears to be that's a lengthy injury. There is a possibility, according to Dave Aranda, that Monterey Baldwin, who can help them stretch the field, who did not play against Texas State, and tight end Ben Sims, they really missed him in that game. He might end up, we thought, could end up being their leading receiver. But Tay McWilliams, no. That doesn't look good as far as him coming back. So that's Baylor. Iowa State, we're going to hear from a former Iowa State defensive lineman on our show on Wednesday to discuss the Cyclones.
I mean, I do think there was good things to take away from it. I mean, the emergence of Richard Reese, and I'm sure we'll unpack a lot of it. That was obviously huge, and to be able to pair him with Squirrel Williams is great. And I'm sure, I think we saw some good things from Blake Shapen ultimately. I mean, he threw his first career interception, and it was a just way telegraphed interception. But beside that, I thought he played pretty well, although some of the numbers won't say that. Like his completion percentage, for example, was, I think, right at 50%. So that's not great. But, overall, I thought that once they woke up a little bit in the second half, and really that big run that he had before halftime was kind of like the spark that I felt like they needed to be able to breathe a little bit. Once they did that, that was good. So there were some good things, like a Richard Reese that emerged from that game. But, I'm sure there's somebody out there that's like, well, hey, it's only, 3 games in, give them a break. They lost a lot from last year, and we're definitely going to do that. But we're also reacting to a lot of the expectations that there were before the year. If the expectations coming in were like, this is going to be a 7-6 team that lost a lot, and hey, they'll make a bowl game, but it'll probably be like the Holiday Bowl or something like that, then, we'd be judging them probably off that. But that was not the expectations. A lot of the time, the expectations did start to climb up more towards the Big 12 favorite, as voted on this summer, and 10 wins, as you can see on certain Vegas lines throughout the offseason. I think there were plenty of reasons to see holes in them and plenty of reasons to be optimistic. And I think right now we're kind of in the middle of they could be that team that's capable of still winning the conference, and I think that they are that team in some ways, and they could be a team that's struggling right there towards the back middle of the conference. And I think they are that team in some ways. And so we're going to find out a lot beginning this Saturday in Ames, Iowa.
Who's going to cover Xavier Hutchinson? We'll get into that. Of course, they had some pockets in that secondary that appeared to be open. Yes, the defense is pretty good. But we'll get into the Baylor and Iowa State again throughout the week, along with the rest of the Big 12. All right, I mentioned who had the best weekend.